Rita, James, what a week in American politics. James, you'll be telling us all about the implosion of the Democrats later in the show, but let's kick off with Trump's State of the Union speech and that silly woman shredding it all up on stage. Rita. Rita. Let's do that bit again. Rita.
Rita! It was a big own goal in a very bad week for the Democrats. Nancy, obviously, it was a pre-planned stunt. She wanted to have a moment. Last year, she did that, you know, that clapping thing, and everyone's like, oh, yay, Queen, that was fantastic. So this year, her big stunt was going to be to rip up the speech. And but what it did was, that was a speech that celebrated great Americans. Americans who've made the ultimate, some of them, the sacrifice for their country. It celebrated the fact that we've got the lowest unemployment rate that Black and Latino Americans have ever had. So when you tear that up, you're tearing up that
success story.
That success, and it has backfired, and now they're desperately trying to backtrack.
James, lots of highlights from the State of the Union.
So many highlights.
Let's just go through a couple. One that I grabbed was Trump on China, which is obviously a key thing. You'll remember how often the left media, not us, by the way, the left media told us that the whole China thing would end in disaster, trade wars, or we're all going to go into a recession, where. And, of course, it was the complete opposite. Let's have a look at Trump on China.
For decades, China has taken advantage of the United States. Now we have changed that. But at the same time, we have perhaps the best relationship we've ever had with China, including with President Xi. They respect what we've done because, quite frankly, they could never really believe that they were able to get away with what they were doing year after year, decade after decade, without someone in our country stepping up and saying, that's enough.
James.
So not only was this a rebuke, I think, to Xi and China and their long history of obnoxious behavior and trade practices and so many other things, but also it was a great rebuke to the foreign policy establishment, which had for decades said, oh, if we just trade with China, if we just give them all our intellectual property, if we just send them all of our jobs, everything else, then, well, you know, it'll be fine, and they'll just become a nice liberal democracy just like us. And, of course, the exact opposite has happened. So not only was this a rebuke to Xi, but it was a rebuke to that whole wasted foreign policy class in Washington. And I know we're the outsiders, guys, but insiders I've talked to in American business have all said, we can't support Trump publicly, but thank God he has done what he has done on China.
And he's got China to behave and pull country like North Korea into line. Remember, we were about to go into World War III with North Korea. That was people couldn't sleep at night because Trump was going to trigger a nuclear war. But what's happened? North and South Korea are actually speaking for the first time in years, and China's exerted pressure on North Korea to behave just a little bit. I mean, they're not exactly a model nation, but
not quite.
Better than before.
You touched on it, Rita, how part of Donald Trump's speech, or really the summation of it, was that America is back in the game. All these years and years of America being kind of not quite what it was in the past, in the good old days of Ronald Reagan and so on. But here's America back. Let's just have a quick look at how Donald Trump summed up his State of the Union speech and that dreadful tearing of the page.
America is the place where anything can happen. America is the place where anyone can rise. And here, on this land, on this soil, on this continent, the most incredible dreams come true. This nation is our canvas, and this country is our masterpiece.
So, Rita, you touched on the job story as well.
Absolutely, and he emphasised that. Let's actually hear from the president himself.
The unemployment rate is the lowest in over half a century. And very incredibly, the average unemployment rate under my administration is lower than any administration in the history of our country.
And James, there were some really moving moments in the speech as well. Talk us through those.
Well, yeah, there were. I mean, we saw all those Democrats sitting on their hands, cult-like, sitting dressed in white, like some sort of...
Can I just say, just those two facts that we heard from the president before all the crazies go, oh, he just lies, they're lies. Well, even the New York Times fact-checkers, who loathe him with every essence of their being, had to do a fact-check true to those jobs claims.
Really? That would have hurt.
It would have hurt, but they had to do it. The figures don't lie.
Yeah, well, not only was there the great news of all the jobs and the economy, there were also some solemn moments, too. And here, I want to just throw a bit of a grab where he's talking about a soldier who was killed. Let's just have a look at this, and then we'll talk about this, because this, I think, is a very important thing he's done as well.
That night, he made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Sergeant Haig now rests in eternal glory in Arlington, and his wife, Kelly, is in the gallery tonight, joined by their son, who is now a 13-year-old and doing very, very well. To Kelly and Gage, Chris will live in our hearts forever. He is looking down on you now. Thank you.
So, I mean, we've got also this very moving moment. There was another moving moment where he reunited a family where the soldier was off in Afghanistan. They brought him back.
Classic reality
it was classic
TV.
reality TV.
Slammed for being reality
But,
TV.
you know, here's the thing, though. All of these people, all these Democrats who are trying to say that Trump is making the world a more dangerous place, well, you know, you look at that, and that's somebody who's a victim of a guy like Soleimani, why he deserved to be killed, why Soleimani deserved to be killed, and yet 2 days later at the New Hampshire debate, which we'll talk about later, they're all saying, oh, we should have gone to the United Nations about Soleimani. You know, it's just ridiculous. But we've also got another group.
Yeah, now Rush Limbaugh is I guess, one of the great figures of the right in American politics. Rita.
Groundbreaking broadcaster,
radio broadcaster.
And just fearless, bold, and Trump acknowledged him. He's suffering from cancer, I think stage 4 cancer. And no other president, I don't think, would have the courage and the judgment to honour Rush Limbaugh, someone who has probably done more to raise awareness of conservative issues and just to fight the fight against that liberal media. But Trump did it, and I think it was one of the really special moments of the State of the Union.
The Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Amazing
This is
stuff.
incredible, because if you look at Rush's face there, he didn't know this was coming. Like, it's so clear. He was just in shock that he was getting this award. And the great thing is,
Melania put it around.
Melania put it around, and all of the Democrats, again, had to sit there on his hands while a guy who had stage 4 lung cancer was being awarded this great honor, and they just had to sit on their hands.
Worse than that, Nancy Pelosi, as we all know, she ripped up the speech afterwards, but she was so nasty and ungracious about that moment and more. Let's have a listen. Let's listen to Nancy.
I have tried to be gracious with him. I'm always dignified. I thought that was a very dignified act compared to my exuberance, as I said. Quite frankly, when he started talking about someone with stage 4 cancer, all of that, I thought he was, I don't know which stage John Lewis's cancer is at, but when he started talking about someone with cancer, we thought he was going to talk about John Lewis, a hero in our country. Come on. So in any event, I feel very liberated.
Could anybody follow what she was saying?
Well,
That's the most coherent she's been for a long time, I tell you. She is... and then she went on, of all people, Nancy Pelosi said that Trump looked sedated during his speech, like he'd been, you know, medicated.
But listen, so it's important to separate these two things, because although it all happened at the same time, we did have the State of the Union address, and we had, of course, his acquittal from impeachment. These two things coincided. Pretty good week.